to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, with my co-hosts...
I'm Jackie.
I'm Diana.
I beat her this time.
So, everyone at home, this is episode 6 of the show. And this week, we're going to be talking about pre-session pairing. If you listen to our preview episode, then you'll know the secret. We'll be talking with a special guest live via Skype. Live for us, not for you. Dr. Amanda Kelly, all the way from sunny Hawaii.
It's cold here in Massachusetts, if you know I have a hat on.
Yes, it's spring in Massachusetts, which means it's cold and wet. As opposed to winter, when it's cold and snowy. So, the article, again, for those of you who decided just to listen to episode 6 because you love number 6, is The Effects of Pre-Session Pairing on the Challenging Behavior and Academic Responding of Children with Autism. And that's by Amanda Kelly, Judah Axe, Ronald Allen, and Russell Maguire from Behavioral Interventions, Volume 30, from 2015. So it was really nice to get this chance to talk about the article with the primary author. We have very limited recording capabilities in this epic studio of ours, which is a table, microphone, laptop, and sometimes we have earbuds to listen in on ourselves. So
we're making it work.
We're making it work. So hopefully the sound quality is up to normal standards and doesn't get too fuzzy. If it does, please purchase some CEs from us so we can buy new equipment for a future episode.
Awesome.
And without any further ado, here's Jackie, Diana, and Dr. Kelly.
Amanda, we're so excited that you're here today.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Great. How's sunny Hawaii?
Today's pretty sunny. It's nice. Really big waves today, which is unusual for the season.
It's cold here.
It's been raining here for like a solid week.
Oh. I went to California and they need rain, you know?
That didn't help.
No.
Okay, so let's talk about your article that you got published in Behavioral Interventions. Is this your dissertation?
This is my dissertation article topic.
Woo!
Yes.
Nicely done.
Woo!
That's awesome.
Thank you.
So, do you want to tell us why you were interested in this and what got you doing this article, like doing this research?
Sure. I mean, the dissertation process is kind of long and painful, I think, for most people. Definitely.
Me?
Yeah, I was going to say it definitely was for me. I had multiple topics, had tried a couple of different avenues and projects, and subjects would, graduate or move on, go to a different grade before things could get through the IRB process. And so this is actually my third dissertation topic. The third one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was seen through to the end, which was very satisfying in that way. It was a really fortunate topic because it, to me, was something that I already knew was going to be effective. And not to go in, with a preconceived notion, but it seems, right? Like, it seems like if you have fun before you do work, then work might be a little bit more fun or a little less work, I guess.
I should use that in my own life, like do something awesome in the morning. My husband actually does that. He probably won't like it that I tell everyone, but he gets up an hour early to play video games. And then
even on like
work.
A work day?
Oh, yeah. On a work day, always.
Oh, wow. I find sleep more reinforcing than almost anything.
Because he doesn't.
Oh, good for him.
But maybe he's doing this pre-session pairing.
That must be what he's doing.
Well,
but I totally agree with you. It's like one of those things that you kind of have that bag of tricks where, if you want to make a work session easier, then there's a bunch of different things that you might try. And I think that whether you call it pre-session pairing or not, trying to do a fun activity at the table before you present your work demand is one of those things that might be in your bag of tricks. So it was cool to read this to say, oh, yeah, like that totally makes sense, and then getting to see more of the theoretical background behind why it might be that does work.
Yeah, I mean, when I looked at, some of the education I had, running Enables, the assessment for basic language learning, prior to maybe now the VB map, there was a lot of talk about establishing yourself as a reinforcer. That's section A, right, the very beginning, and
right.
how effective are reinforcers. And so there's a lot of talk about this procedure and how to pair yourself or how to become fun. And Sundberg and Partington are some of the first authors to mention that. We also look at Mary Barbera, who did the verbal behavioral approach or wrote that book. And her book, the premise of getting language, acquisition is to use motivation and to be fun and pair yourself. So I felt confident that it was not going to necessarily be an easy dissertation process, but how could we have sort of an outcome that we know works and document that through a difficult dissertation process?
Gotcha.
Cool. So here's some preliminary questions that we had while we were reading this. One thing that we like to do for our listeners that are in their car or listening on their couch or in their rooms, wherever you listen, guys, we like that to give like a general overview and some definitions of words, so that if they're not as familiar with the literature, that they kind of have a grasp of what's going on before we talk about the article. And your article talks about CMOs. Can you tell us what those are?
I'll do my best.
I bet you're going to do better than me.
CMOs stand for Condition Motivating Operation. Going back further, prior to when I was studying, motivating operations were often called establishing operations. So if you're looking at literature in the past, you might be seeing EOs versus the description of an MO. So that can be confusing if you're not aware of that. And there's a further distinction, the further our field evolves. And now we are looking at motivating operations as that umbrella. They can either be establishing or abolishing. So when we are talking about condition motivating operations, there are obviously situations in which pairing has occurred of some sort. So a neutral stimulus now has acquired these properties. When we talk about motivating operations, they're momentary states. So they're not an item or a particular piece of an environment. They're that sort of interaction, the context, if you will. So it's momentary and momentarily impacting behavior. When we look at a condition motivating operation, momentarily it may signal the worsening set of conditions. So work might be coming. Traffic might be on its way. Something that we're not really looking forward to is coming. That would make momentarily anything that gets that warning signal to go away more reinforcing. When I think of the R, it stands for reflexive. I try to remember it as it means the removal of itself is reinforcing.
So R is for removal?
R's, to me, it's for the removal.
That's a good mnemonic. I like that.
Yeah.
That actually is really helpful.
Yeah, okay. And then you also talk about pre-session pairing. You want to tell us a little bit what that is?
Yeah, it's a term that I think we've coined, the authors. It's not maybe the very first time it was used, and some would say you have to demonstrate an effect before you can call it something. And this article, my dissertation, was the first demonstration of that effect that we saw. So certainly additional studies will be needed to make it more robust before we say it's a procedure. But what it means essentially is, according to Sundberg and Partington, they said it's approaching a child who's not engaged or an individual who's not engaged in a reinforcing activity, presenting that reinforcing activity. So, Jackie, for your husband, it would be, hey, here I am with those video games, but we're going to participate in the consumption or we're going to engage in that item together. So it's not just having...
That's not happening at my house.
No 6 a.m.
No 6 a.m.
Call of Duty for you.
No Halo in the morning. All right. So it's really important that the engagement happens with the instructor when we're talking about work tasks. And then I actually sought the advice of Dr. Mary Barbera and said, do you have to pair at a table? Can I pair on the floor? Can I pair in the hallway? Can I, when I'm, logistically retrieving these students from their classroom, is that a confound? What are her thoughts on that? And she really shared that she feels it's very important to pair at the place of instruction. So where the instruction is going to occur and where you want to have the most control. So while you may initially have a lot of instruction on the floor for an early learner, If your goal is to have some tabletop instruction or to have, the best attending skills, I think not just the most control, she encouraged it to be at the table. So for us, that was the table. That was the place of instruction for our learners in this study.
I think that would make sense, though, because
Sure would.
it's not just the instructor who might be part of the presentation of the aversive event, but it's the setting as well. So if you have the reinforcing activities happen in that setting, hopefully it'll be a little more reinforcing.
So you were saying with the setting, it's not just the teacher who could acquire that aversive property. It really is the environment. It's the place of instruction. When you think about the classroom isn't always aversive. The table where you ask a child to come over and do work isn't always aversive. The teacher isn't always aversive. And actually, that's something that we really tried to consider when we did our functional analysis, and maybe I can talk more about that when we talk about some of that section. But looking at having those items that are part of the environment that evoke some of those challenging behaviors, it's interesting that they don't always, right, evoke that behavior. So it's that combination and sort of teasing apart how many components have to be in place before it's aversive or signaling maybe the worsening set of conditions.
So, Amanda, what was the purpose of your study?
The purpose of our study was to determine what would be the effects of this pre-session pairing, and that's what we coined it for this study. So providing access to highly reinforcing or preferred items with the instructor at the place of instruction to see if we could decrease challenging behaviors. I think it's a really practical study. I think it's something that everyone can relate to. Very significant high social validity. And social acceptability with our procedures and with what we were trying to do here. So we wanted to see, did it have any effect on the rate of challenging behavior, as well as, what was the impact on actually the acquisition of new skills? And so we were targeting some academic acquisition as well.
Awesome. We were talking about that earlier. Yeah. I felt like that was a really nice addition here. You could have just looked at overall decrease in challenging behavior or general compliance to task, but you also were looking at acquisition of skills, which was like a nice little cherry on top, I felt.
Thanks.
Yeah, we loved that part.
Yeah. I also really like the name pre-session pairing. It makes perfect sense. Like, you can picture it exactly what it is. Like a little hors d'oeuvre before the main course. It's a good name.
Sampling. Thank you.
Yeah. Exactly.
Can you tell us a little bit about who you used as participants?
Sure. Yeah. I was really fortunate. The school I worked at in Massachusetts, the special education director, their team, the teachers, everybody really helped make this study possible in a public school setting. And so I think that was blew my mind, and maybe of my professors more than anything, was to see that we were able to get separate classrooms used as well for our study. So we had 3 participants who met the criteria. We were looking for those who had escape maintain behavior. So we did do a functional analysis of actually 6 different students. 3 met the criteria for the function we were looking for.
Okay.
We had Ariel, who was 9 years old with autism. She had no real functional communication. So these were students who were in need of some support and services who also were not necessarily accessing that at the time. So the study allowed students to access services I felt they needed to be able to conduct some assessments and share with their teams. And it also wasn't pulling them away from any other services that they might have been getting because they weren't really in that situation. With Ariel, we saw self-injurious behavior. Some of it was pretty intense, biting to her wrist, face slaps, and then there were table hits, so her face to the table or her face to a wall. Sometimes, and so that's a behavior I'd love to see decrease for her, for her team, for her family. Obviously, I'd like to see communication increase. Those were some sort of collateral pieces, I think, of this study, not our original intention. With Jonah, he was an 11-year-old male with autism as well, a diagnosis. He was considered very fluent. Actually, his challenging behavior was negative statements, and some of those were quite colorful.
Okay.
So his language was pretty well developed, but we also saw task refusal, just non-responsiveness, and swearing behaviors. For our third participant, she was also 11 years old, female with an autism spectrum diagnosis. She was a capable verbal communicator, but she was very selective when she communicated. She didn't have an official diagnosis of anything impacting her selectivity, although she may have certainly qualified. She had similar challenging behaviors that she exhibited to Jonah, which was task refusal, non-responsiveness, those negative statements. Also property destruction, which involved like smushing the marker tips and ripping up tissue paper and papers.
That is very fun. So I'm on board with her. I actually love ripping the tips off of markers.
Really?
Yeah.
Doesn't it go all over your fingers?
So what? It's like a little triangle when you do it. It's like, and then it just falls off.
I would be so sad. When that happens to my marker, I'm so sad.
Don't let me at your markers.
I guess not. I was just thinking how fun it is to engage in negative escape maintain statements.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
What are some of yours that you use?
I can't say them on this podcast, Jackie.
Yeah, there is no swearing allowed. So you know.
Oh, good.
Okay, so that's really helpful, and I think I love getting that background where finding out things like you did 6 FAs
Yeah.
to land on participants who seem like they were appropriate for these sessions. And that also helps me interpret some of the functional analysis data further, too, in that for Jonah and Susanna, you saw responding in both the attention and the demand conditions. So there was likely that was maybe multiply maintained. But you most wanted to see some responding in the demand.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I asked for participants who were presenting with challenging behavior when their teachers asked them to do work. That was originally sort of the first way to scope out a sample was who's available, who's having these challenging problems, and then are those challenges really related to the demand themselves, or were they related to something else? And so what we found was for some of our students, so for Jonah and Susanna, we did have multiply maintained behavior. We had an attention component, and demand really came out as the secondary maintaining function, possibly. With Ariel, it was much clearer distinction. So it's okay if it had other, functions. Certainly, lots of behaviors, multiply maintained, lots of times, many occasions. But with Ariel, I think when we saw just how intense her behaviors were and how clear that function was. I think for replications, I'd like to look at more aerials, honestly. More challenge, and then if you can see the improvement, it feels obviously more convincing, I think.
Oh, yeah. And her functional analysis data were so clear. You saw responding almost exclusively occurring in the demand condition. And then when it was occurring, it was 90 to 100% of the intervals she engaged in challenging behavior.
Yeah, when you have a chance to look at the graphs, and I know that's hard for people on the podcast here, but for Ariel, we actually looked at percentage of challenging behavior, and we looked at intervals because the rate of the frequency of the behavior was much higher. Whereas for Jonah and Susanna, we were able to do a frequency count and stick with our direct measures, which I think are ideal whenever possible, trying to not convert the data. But with Ariel, we really that was the most accurate way to depict her rate.
Hey everyone, Rob here. Just popping in for a real quick second to tell you our secret code words if you're interested in purchasing CEs for this week's episode. The first code word is apple, A-P-P-L-E, one of the best fruits that you could possibly have, apple. Okay, and back to the conversation.
So, can you tell us a little bit about your dependent variables?
Sure. So for each participant, they were slightly different. We were looking at their challenging behaviors, so the bites to wrist, face slaps, table hits, high-pitched crying for Ariel. We didn't really delineate or separate which behaviors were occurring. They were just sort of her self-injury was called self-injury.
Okay.
When we looked at the effects and still saw some behavior occurrences, it's important to note that was the crying behavior. So I could report that sort of topographically it was very different. So the intensity was also very different, which makes the effects even more, I think, compelling and helpful. And with Jonah and Susanna, we were looking at the non-responsiveness, the property destruction. Now, for their academic acquisition, We did have a token system in place. They had history with token systems. They were in the 4th and 5th grade, so they had probably mixed history with those. And that was just correct responses resulted in that item or token, 5 correct responses. It's interesting that we did look at correct responses, and we can talk about that a little bit more when we get to the results. The compliance to task way increased. So they were highly focused, engaged, seeking out the table. But it doesn't necessarily make, math any easier.
Right.
I wish it did.
Yeah.
So you guys reported on both challenging behavior and correct responses.
We
correct?
did. For Ariel, when we were looking at her task, just so you guys are aware on the line as well, she had picture words that I would then say, so CVC words like sun. So I would say sun, sun. And she had letter tiles A through Z that she could scan and was working on composing those sounds. If she didn't make an error but paused, I could repeat the instructions. So sun, sun. And then she would then either spell it correctly or incorrectly. Prompts were given for preventing sort of, when an incorrect response occurred, correction procedures were in place. But we were looking at skills that were currently in their IEP, so their individual education plan. These were not the particular items they hadn't been exposed to themselves. And then we also did a novel task, and the novel task for Ariel was where we would have a number card, a flash card that would say like 7, and then she'd have manipulatives where she'd need to count out 7 items or a corresponding amount. For Jonah and Susanna, I think something that really surprised a lot of people was that we were working on reducing, adding, and subtracting fractions as our task in a discrete trial. Yeah, I had to definitely get more fluent.
Right?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I might have to relearn how to do that.
Yeah, like getting those common denominators. I'm like, okay, don't forget that. Nothing worse than prompting or correcting a response when you're incorrect. So that happened once, actually.
That must be a grade level skill for an 11-year-old.
Yep, I guess that's what was, appropriate for where they were at least, working towards those grade level objectives. And so it's interesting when you think about doing discrete trial, or when we talk about doing discrete trial, I think a lot of my previous experience had been with what I would think of more simple tasks, or tasks that weren't maybe as multiple steps as you could have here. And the reason why we also looked at adding and subtracting those fractions was because the instruction occurred over a period of time. And so they are going to acquire skills if I'm effectively teaching. So I wanted to make sure that the level of difficulty of the task was maintained throughout the dissertation study. So if we just worked on reducing fractions the whole time, it would have become too easy. I think we would have seen the reduction in challenging behaviors for a different reason.
Right.
Yeah. And then their novel tasks, so just a follow-up, was looking at identifying nouns and verbs. So I would say something like, or hold up a card that said, the book fell off the shelf. And then it would be write the noun in blue and the verb in black. And they would have 2 markers and a dry erase board. So again, pretty complex. But interestingly, they became relatively fluent in that task.
Cool. Wow. That's really awesome. I love that you used things that would fit in with their IEP as well. I think that really adds to the social validity of the study, and that these are skills that they needed to be practicing within their regular school day. So kudos to that.
Kudos.
Do they make kudos bars anymore?
Yeah, they totally make kudo bars.
I used to eat those. Maybe I was in like 4th or 5th grade, actually.
Right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
They were good.
We'll go to the store.
That took me there.
Next week I'll get some kudo bars and some bugles, and we'll put them on our fingers.
All right. That sounds great, too.
I know.
Oh, my gosh.
I don't actually think they make bugles anymore.
Talking about MOs, man. It's got me all hungry for kudos.
One thing that I like, before we talk about the procedures, is that you did procedural integrity. This has been my main PowerPoint.
The opposite of a pet peeve.
Yeah, PowerPoint. That's what I like to call it.
PowerPoint.
But not as a PowerPoint as in one word, but 2 words.
Oh, yes, of course.
2 capital
I gotcha.
P's.
PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Okay.
basically, anytime I'm teaching a class or reading an article, I, like, skip straight to the procedural integrity section, and I'm like, is it there? And it's here. And when we were looking at it initially today at Diana's oldest son's baseball game, I was like, oh, I'm so bummed there's no procedural integrity, because I figured it would be next to the IOA. And I was like, oh, I'm so sad. And then I was like, it's here! And it's great. So that makes me really happy that you did that, because I don't know why people don't include that always. Right?
Yeah.
If you're taking IOA, you might as well take procedural integrity data.
I feel like it's assumed sometimes, and we don't often think about separating them apart. Right. And when you're looking at a dissertation, I mean, they really want you to just write and write and write, and you think you're done, and then they need to go on a family vacation. So now you got to go and do more integrity and write and review and read. That's just the painful process of dissertation writing. But really it was, we wanted to make sure, and it was done throughout the study before moving on to another condition, making sure that the conditions that were run. So we didn't just collect the procedural integrity throughout the study on 30%. It was done throughout conditions before we would even move on to the additional conditions. So we did look at it on 30% of our sessions, but equal balanced across conditions. High range, I think a lot of that also had to do with the people who are observing and doing a lot of my IOA with me and looking at some of the integrity. They were highly trained behavior analysts, so it was easy to get the definitions understood. But I also was following a checklist, and I was the one implementing the dissertation study, and I was doing it, many days a week. And so it became relatively easy to ensure fidelity when you have only one person or one to two people really implementing things.
Still, though, important to have. So now I know that you did what you said you did.
And everyone agreed.
And everyone agreed with it.
Check.
Double check. So now that we've talked a lot about why you did it, can you tell us what you did?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had these students were being serviced. Ariel was pretty much fully self-contained, whereas Jonah and Susanna were in an integrated situation, a classroom, as well as received some instruction in a self-contained classroom. Wherever they were located, I tried to make sure that I wasn't taking them during a time that they really wanted to be there, so I didn't want to compete with what was happening in the classroom. I wanted to keep it as neutral as possible. For example, if they were having ice cream or a pizza party, it wouldn't be like, hey, let's go work with, Amanda down the hall. I think that would have also skewed the results.
A major bummer.
Yeah.
I'm
worried about also pairing myself and having to place the demand and transitioning down to the office or the room in which we did the study. Mm-hmm. So I was really fortunate that there was a behavior analyst working at the school, working towards her BCBA, and was able to work with me and would retrieve the students and sort of drop them off for me. So I didn't have to cloud or engage with them prior to what I was looking to do for the study. What that looked like when they would come into the room, we had done preference assessments. We had done a brief pre-operant preference assessment. So items were laid out on a table. They could engage with more than one item. We would see how long they engaged with items, which items they chose. For Susanna, she only engaged with one item and access to attention. Attention was one of the items. Mm-hmm. So that was great. We know it was super highly reinforcing potentially, but nothing else. So had her classroom special education teacher run a pair choice preference assessment after training the teacher. That was video recorded, and we also conducted IOA on that. And we were able to get a range of items for all the participants after that. So they would come into the room. It was a pretty sterile room, a table with two chairs and a desk, someone's office desk, but it was clean of clutter. And we had a rug on the floor. And there were moderate or low items that rated as moderate or low preferred that were available. So free access. You can play with the little viewfinder or flip through some cards or put a sticker on your hand. What was in those bins would vary depending on which student was coming in the room. I would then say, come here, cue them over to the table, and in our baseline conditions, I would then present the demand. I would say, hold up a picture of the cat and say, cat, and then Ariel would compose or construct the response, or I would prompt her or correct her in her response. And then after earning, I believe it was 5 tokens, they could then trade in, engage in access to that item for a few minutes, and then we'd go back into additional trials. What the only difference really was for the pre-session pairing was they would come in the room, still go to the rug, play with moderately or low preferred items. I would say come here. So at this point, nothing feels different about the instructional environment. And the second they would sit down, I would say, what do you want? And hold up 2 items that rated as highly preferred. So I think we were looking at 80% or higher. For Ariel, that would be like the iPad with Angry Birds, or it was, like music with Lady Gaga, or it would be, this other game, or stringing beads. And it was a self-stimulatory behavior she would engage in. Mm-hmm. I was not necessarily looking to change that as part of the study, so it was a highly preferred item or activity. I would give her a bead, she'd string it, we would both sort of stare at that string, and then we would exchange it, and it was a beautiful thing,
Yeah.
And then
you just sort of interject yourself into the beads.
Right.
Yeah, right. I would just sort of like hold them, and then I could give one to her, and she wanted to then string them on. She started to offer me the string, and then I'd put the bead on, and I would mimic what she had done with the string. And then what I did was, I'm highly animated at this time. So I'm like, wow.
Wait, can you show us? Show us.
You want me to do it for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, whoa, look at these beads.
Ooh, that is animated.
I'm like laughing, and I was dancing to Lady Gaga. I mean, there are videos luckily I don't think they exist anymore, of the fun. You have to be fun. We can operationally define that. I think that's very hard for a lot of people to get really good fidelity and integrity on how to be fun and not feel foolish. And it's okay if you feel foolish. I think that means you're doing it right. Yeah. Now, for our students, I didn't just end a task. It wasn't like, oh, you have 2 minutes to play with me. The timer went off. But Lady Gaga is still singing about Poker Face, and because of that, we made the decision that we were going to end at the natural end of an activity. So there was a range. You'll see a 2 to 4 minute range when you look at the study, when you look at the data. Some songs are shorter than others. Some games are longer than others. But we were able to pick tasks that could end there. I think that simple consideration, that simple adaptation could make all the difference on its own and should just be investigated. What happens when we don't cut our students off of reinforcing activities at arbitrary time limits,
Yeah. I know it. I don't like it when people cut me off from, like, my favorite show that I'm watching right now.
Can I finish?
Yeah.
Can I finish? Can I finish? Can I finish?
Oh. One thing that we like, and we wrote down...
That was Dana Carvey.
Oh, I didn't know who it was. Mm-hmm. In the article, when we were reading it, is Diana wrote, can't wait to read this in 20 years, when you were, like, looking at Lady Gaga and Rihanna.
All the reinforcers are, like, so specific to, like, today. Right? Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, Angry Birds... Who Wants to Be a Millionaire board game.
It's a time capsule article.
Plants vs. Zombies and Fruit Ninja. Like, that is like 2015. Like, right there.
Yeah, we're like, wow. We'll put it in a time capsule.
I love
it. Open it up later.
These kids are with the times.
They really are.
Yeah, very happening.
These kids are hip.
They're really hip.
Yeah.
That's great.
Cool. Well, that sounds pretty fun. It seems fairly easy too.
It's such a simple manipulation.
It is easy, I think, if you are a person who can be fun and have fun. Mm-hmm. I think if we're looking to teach others to do this, it can be really easy. It didn't cost me anything. I used items that were in their classrooms or that were available in their school because I wanted to see the effects of this. I wanted to see the benefits of it, be able to be continued when I wasn't conducting a dissertation study. So as a behavior analyst, what should we do? We should set up the natural environment and make sure that these behaviors can be reinforced with what's naturally around them. Yeah, I mean, I would like to think and hope that their teachers didn't take it as too prescriptive and know that now that these students are in the 7th grade, they can like Miley Cyrus or whoever.
Only Katy Perry forever.
That's it.
That would be really funny. Hey, I have a quick question for you before we get to the results. I love to ask this question when I read other people's articles. So this is just the question that I love to ask. So when you did your FA, you said you did a brief FA based on Wilder et al. 2001. Why did you choose that one?
Because I was in a public school, because it's short, because it was abbreviated, and because it had pretty high reliability or accuracy with their results for extended FAs. Also, I think, as I mentioned, just time being difficult, and I wanted to run enough of those conditions. So, they were short. It was easily replicable. Tough word for me to say, but I could replicate it. And we got those clear differentiated results. I think without those results, then we would need to, do more, but be as parsimonious as possible.
During your pre-session pairing phase, did you require the students to make eye contact with you or interact? Or were you just there having fun and they were attending to you because you were so fun?
Usually because I was the one who had access to the items, it was easy to get their engagement. For Susanna and Jonah, attention also rated as a function for some of their behaviors, so I think it was naturally kind of going to occur for them. But there was a challenge that came up, and I think that this is a real challenge. What do you do when the learner doesn't want to interact or participate with you? That came up with Jonah and I initially, where we were playing a game together on the iPad, and then he took it and was like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and he just started narrating what he was doing, but he was in no way wanting to give it back, and asking for it back or interjecting his game, I think, would have not been well received. And so I started commenting oh no, that zombie's gonna eat you, you better shoot him, I don't know if you can do that, can you get that, he's gonna, And then we got into a lot of verbal engagement that was really positive. And it was I'm going to beat my high score. And I'm I don't know if you can do it. Yeah, watch me. So there were other ways to engage that were not what I had originally anticipated. And I think that when we are viewing this as a teaching procedure, we want to keep in mind that the purpose is to have fun and to be engaged and to do it together. And if that is not the right item or the right task, then maybe you let them engage with that task, and next time you reassess what you're going to engage with.
Smart.
Okay, cool.
All right. Do you want to tell us what you found?
Yeah, we found that a relatively simple, easy, cost-free, other than my time, intervention reduced our challenging behaviors near immediately. When we look at, and I teach a lot talking about change in level and the amount of overlap, it would be easy for someone to believe or to question whether or not this is real data. The good news is it is. We have strong agreement. It went through a rigorous publication. It's a dissertation, but it's very clean data.
It is. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm really grateful for that, certainly for the purposes of the dissertation. Now, when we look at the baseline rates for Ariel, they were fluctuating, but they were between 40 to 70% of the time we were seeing challenging behavior. For Jonah, he started off kind of maybe, I think, thinking this novel situation might not have been so bad. The next day it got worse. The next day it got worse. Right. And then it's just this real nice slope. Yeah.
Like a J.
He clued in real quickly, which is actually why when you look at the intervention phase there, for Jonah, we only held him in baseline one session longer than Ariel, because truly when he was starting to engage in those challenging behaviors, they were intensifying in their topography and in their intensity. And I wasn't sure we were physically going to be able to have him in the room if I kept him in baseline for much longer. So that was a decision made based off the data, made based off those participants. Obviously, if we were going to do this again, or if we didn't have that concern, we would have held him in baseline longer.
I don't know if you had to, though. I mean, really,
the increasing trend is so clear in the data.
You have an increasing trend. The baseline is staggered. No one says that you have to stagger it forever. And if it's clinical, come on.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I feel good about the decision, but certainly, I guess, in a hypothetical situation, I would have extended it. You know, I would have extended it at least another session. Maybe not another 12 sessions.
Yeah, right.
Susanna, we held off on implementing with her or intervening with her the last. She was the least intense with her challenging behaviors, and that's why she got to go last. And her challenging behaviors, as I mentioned, were things like smashing our markers and ripping up our tissues, which mattered. I had to make several runs to Target in their dollar bin that week, you know, or weeks, but didn't really pose any significant harm. So for all three participants, we saw an immediate change in level, a huge significant change, no overlap except for one data point, 4 sessions into intervention for Ariel, it skyrockets back up to baseline rates. She had an unusual dental procedure completed that weekend that I was not aware of. And
it always happens.
I know, right? Yeah.
It's like, wow, my data is horrible. What happened? They're like, oh, yeah, we took him off meds, and then we put him on this new meds, and then we gave him dairy, and he's allergic to dairy. Hope he's not pooping his pants. Hope it didn't mess up your study.
Hey folks, Rob here. Just one more time with our second secret code word if you are going to be purchasing CEs. And that code word is Disney. D-I-S-N-E-Y. Doesn't matter if it's capital or not. Disney. Like the guy and the park, the land and the world. All right. Anyway, here's the end of our conversation with Dr. Kelly.
Yeah, well, you know, I guess the relief was that we were able to attribute it to something instead of it just being this random, you know, or feeling random, or at least not having an explanation. So we saw that, and then we saw the rates recover. So it didn't feel like it was too much of a threat, but, well, we did want to identify it. It is there in our data because it existed in real life. And then for Ariel had access to her 5 months later. The other 2 students were in 5th grade, had moved on to middle school. They were gone. So that was just a logistical limitation for why we didn't do a maintenance trial with them. And with maintenance, went in and sort of returned to the baseline conditions. There was no pairing. And her rates are just low and stayed low. So what we saw was this reduced the amount of challenging behavior significantly, immediately, and it persisted. And so much so that pairing wasn't needed indefinitely. Now, there's a lot of aspects and components and replications and extensions that I think are needed here, definitely. But for a first demonstration, it's really compelling. And I think it gives us a lot of support for what, like you said, Diana, like that we've been doing. It's been in our bag of tricks for so many years for so many of us. And then for their academic behaviors, what we saw was the accurate responding went down in baseline for Jonah. So as his challenging behaviors are increasing, his academic responding was plummeting. Now, math wasn't getting harder for him. He was still capable to do the task on Friday that he could do on Monday. But with the presence of challenging behaviors, it was sort of an incompatible behavior. Responding correctly while you're engaged in challenging behaviors isn't happening. So when I look at his graphs next to each other, I'm like, wow, look, the behaviors go up and the responding goes down.
Yeah, I can see that, yeah.
Yeah, so if those are overlapped on a graph, I think, wow, that's pretty telling. But what I saw was persistent and consistent compliance to task, but really a variable acquisition rate for accurate responding. And for Ariel, we never really saw the responding or the acquisition of the task that we would have liked to have seen, and I think that some teaching modifications were needed for her program there. But what we did see was a substantial reduction in her challenging behaviors, which had never afforded her that time for instruction. So now that we had the time for instruction, we were like, oh, this might not be the right instructional approach.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I wish some of these points we could put in articles, right? Like, we can't write forever. But I mean, we wouldn't want to write forever, right? But
well, you do write forever for your dissertation,
right? But
and then it all gets chopped out.
Yeah. And so you're like, now take 1 out of 365 pages, and that's what you will copy. But that would be interesting because that's not something that I really pulled from the article. But I think it's really important to hear about because when we look at the academic graph, I mean, it looks okay, but there's not like a ton of change. But
for Ariel.
Yeah. Right. But there's really not a lot of time either. I mean, like, we can't really expect a student that previously wasn't making any progress to then all of a sudden make progress after only like 12 sessions. Right? Like, who learns?
Yeah, she likely needed, a lot of assistance to learn
Right.
new skills. So this wasn't really that long a period of time.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And then her novel task performance was pretty high. But was she learning that task at another point in time? Or was it a brand new task to her?
It was a task that I hadn't presented to her, and it was a task that was on her IEP but not yet introduced. So the fact that she was doing so well at it was excellent.
Yeah.
We were thrilled. But I'm not sure what kind of conclusions can be made from her academic
just the 1 point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
Alrighty.
Wow. Do you want to give us any more, like, take-home points before we talk about future research and where this could go in our life?
I think we've made a lot of the points that I really wanted to make, that we should have natural ends to those access to reinforcing times, that like interrupting the middle of a song is a practice that I had done early on. It's something I was told to do. The timer goes off, you and what your
I used
child's
to do that
doing,
too. I never do it anymore.
Yeah, I absolutely won't do it now. And I start now to think a lot about like, oh, hey, like, let me help you erase that instead of like grabbing someone's pencil to erase things. Like, so just from being a practitioner and a clinician, I think those things are really important. Remembering to have fun, that when we walk into homes or schools or classrooms, that it shouldn't be like, here's the behavior analyst. It should be like, hey, here's the behavior analyst, right?
Yeah.
Something really amazing that I didn't anticipate but was so pleased to see in our study was students would come in and they would be instructed to go play on the rug. And we did have conditions indicated by different colors on the door and on the table, and we're consistent with other studies of just try to, discriminate those or help our learners discriminate those. And Jonah especially would come in and he just would come sit at the table with me and he'd like, wait. And I'm like, well, hey, what are you doing? You have to go over here. And I would try to like look busy. And so I try to write down like, the entire alphabet, and I'd write down like how many ABA words start with A, and I'd be like antecedent, apply, because I needed to look like really busy, and I was busy doing that. He would choose to sometimes just sit at the table and wait and not even play with anything else, or he would try to engage me in conversation, and I'd say like, oh, sorry, I'm busy, and he'd be like, that's cool, I'll wait for you whenever you're ready.
Aww.
There was a lot of politeness, so not just like lack of certain behaviors, but definitely the replacements. And the replacements were really shifting the qualitative value of interactions that these learners could have. So I thought, wow. And then also when I looked at for Ariel, she started doing the same thing, and I'm thinking, she has definitely a style that she's functioning at a place that's not where Jonah's at. Mm-hmm. And she has the communication deficits that are working against her as well and a barrier for her. And she'd come over and she'd try to go grab the beads and be like, hey, let's do it. Let's stim and let's play.
Let's stare at these beads together.
And then I also saw that when it was time for the task to be presented, I expected to get punched in the face a few times, or to be called a nastier name than what happened. Actually, students started cleaning up for me. So like a timer would beep and I'm supposed to now take away your Lady Gaga Plants vs. Zombie beads or whatever we're playing with, and immediately say like, now do some work. What I would see happening, and I try to be super immediate, have the materials ready, have things right there. But at times, Ariel would just start cleaning up, and she'd hand it to me and go put it away, or she'd get her work, knowing it's time to get work. And that, I felt like, that's the indicator of success. Scientifically, whatever happened here, it's like, well, what happened here qualitatively is children are seeking out work. They are terminating their highly preferred activities, and they are attending and being receptive for instruction that they weren't before. So I also did ask the 3 participants what they thought about the study and did a social validity measure from them. And I had asked, Jonah was my favorite response of, So what did you like better? Did you like when you came in the room and then, like, you just did work? Or did you like when you came in the room, we, like, played together and then you did work? And he was like, why is this a question? Obviously. He was like, the second thing was better. And I was like, okay, right. And I was like, well, why was it better? Tell me why. And he said, because it was just much more fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Did you start crying? Because I totally would have started crying.
I just try to hide it.
I have something in my eye. I'm cutting onions over here.
It's okay. Yeah. So that was definitely some unexpected and some really beneficial outcomes for me with that part of the study.
Cool. All right, guys. Do you know what time it is?
What time is it?
It's time to get on the dissemination station.
Whoop,
on the train.
Oh, yeah, on the train.
We're on the dissemination train.
Train. It's because Rob usually says that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be Rob right now. It's not working. But here I go. We're here.
Now we're in the dissemination station.
Yeah.
Woo! We pulled in. So, Amanda, what should we do now? How can we disseminate this? What future research could we do?
Oh, gosh. I think extensions, replications, looking at students with different functioning levels or current levels of performance. I think how long can the delay be between the pairing and the delivery of the demand to still have the effect? That'd be something I'd be really interested in, because if we're talking about just this as an effect, parents, right? If they can do something prior to dinner time, what does that mean? What does it look like? But can it be 30 minutes before dinner time?
Right.
I think I know some of the answers to that, but it's all about empirically evaluating it, for sure. How official does the preference assessment need to be to yield results? Could informal assessments also yield these same results? I'm not sure. So those would be some extensions or clarifications I think that could really add to the literature.
Me too.
That's awesome. I'm always looking for ways to increase the value of social interaction for my very young learners that I work with. And I wonder if this would be an interesting way to do a pre-session pairing session and then sort of reevaluate how open those learners would be to interacting in a less formal environment with their teachers.
So what would an example of a formal environment be, and what would an example of an informal environment be?
A formal environment would be the work session. Or like you're saying, like going over to the table and sitting down.
Okay.
But if they were in a less formal, just play session,
okay. I get it.
We've done studies in the past where there's like a split room assessment, right? Where
so
there's identical sets of toys on each side of this piece of masking tape on the floor, and you can either play with the toys alone on one side of the room or play with the toys with an adult on the other side of the room, and we measure how much time kids engage in each set of toys.
That do be in 2008?
It might be 2008. I have to look.
I'm going to look right now.
Okay, thanks. So I wonder if doing something like this would change the value of that type of social interaction for a learner.
Yeah, I think a lot about where the foundational and the building skills came for this study, and we looked at pre-session access, and there's a lot by O'Reilly and colleagues as well. So if you load up on the attention, then can you get to a place where when you aren't able to provide that attention, they're no longer in a state of deprivation, but maybe momentarily satiated? I think when we look at the assessment style like you were talking about, Diana, I would want to do some reinforcer sampling, right? So like, hey, here's what it looks like on this side of the room with me, and it's fun. And then see, sort of what they engage in. I think that could really be an interesting contribution as well.
Amanda was talking about O'Reilly and colleagues 2008 and O'Reilly and colleagues 2009 and O'Reilly and colleagues 2010.
They were busy.
Woo-hoo. They were busy. And awesome. Yeah.
I forgot what I was going to say.
That happens sometimes. Cool. So, what I think I'm taking home from this is that it doesn't hurt to be fun. It probably helps to be fun.
Yeah.
If you're trying to get work done.
It helps to be fun, but also respectful. I think that that's the undercurrent of what you're saying, too. Yeah. That it's an interaction with that child, and you want to be respectful of their time.
You're treating them as a human.
Yeah.
Not as just like, oh, we have to get this work done.
Yeah, I think we get on our, we have agendas and we have objectives and we have tasks and goals that we need to accomplish, and we're very data-driven and oriented, and we should be. But when I'm thinking about the social acceptability of our procedures and our approaches, I want parents thinking, oh, gosh, Amanda's coming. My kid's going to have so much fun today.
Yeah.
Or this is going to look like play. And it should and it can look that way. The other thing is it's sort of also, I think, a piece of caution that should go out there. When I have worked at places or with people who are starting, let's say, with a new client, they're like, well, I'm going to pair for the first 3 weeks, and then I'm going to start building in demands. And I think that might be a mistake. And we
I
should
agree with
be,
you, actually.
Yeah, we should be looking at the research and see, is that needed? Should it be the first 20 minutes of each session for 3 weeks? Should it be maybe just the first couple of sessions for 1 week? Should it be just the first 2 to 4 minutes of each session for one day? Mm-hmm. Those are really good questions. I think the whole point is that it should be the least amount that you need it to be, and in the sense that work can still also be fun. Fun can happen within the task, not just before the task. And if we wait too long to build in demand, I think we're going to end up with a resistance and an expectation that we're going to be only having fun. Yep. So, yeah.
That did happen with me. I was consulting to a case, and when I went to go watch the therapist work with the student, they were only having fun for 8 months. And then they were trying to introduce task demands, and the kid was like, no way. And she's like, yeah, well, I just really wanted to condition myself as a really fun reinforcer. And I was like, yeah, I think
that teacher's in the friend zone.
Yeah. So I was like, ooh, you really dug yourself a huge hole right here. You're never getting out. 8 months is a long time to be playing. And poor kid, right? A young child, like under the age of 3, could have probably used all that time to learn stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I was just like, let's put on my professional face. Well, good. It was so awesome to talk to you today.
Thanks. I know I haven't seen you much. You know, you live on the other side of the world. What's up with that, you guys?
I know. Are you going to ABAI?
Of course. Yeah, I was thinking about taking a year off, and then I got chastised for that. So this will be actually my 10th consecutive ABBA, so we should celebrate.
Yay!
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
10-year anniversary. So cool. I'll be there for sure. Actually, just bought my ticket today.
Oh,
right?
Nice.
Yeah.
Close.
Really close.
So anyone that's listening to the podcast, if you see Amanda Kelly, a.k.a. Behavior Babe, at ABAI, you have to go wish her a happy conference anniversary.
All right.
And buy her a drink.
10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, a drink and a selfie. That would be great. That would be awesome.
Oh, drink and selfie. There you go.
Very cool.
All right. Well, we will talk to you soon. Thanks so much for coming. And yeah, it was really great to talk to you about your research.
Awesome. Aloha, guys. Take care.
Aloha.
Bye.
All right. Well, that was a great conversation, you guys. Thanks so much for, Jaggy, thanks so much for helping set up this interview. It was really nice to have a special guest on to get to learn a little bit more about a topic, with probably a follow-up episode in the next few weeks about condition motivating operations, because it's a pretty big and I think complex topic. Big enough that we really were able to have an hour-long conversation just on one article related to it. So, and there's a lot of questions. I know one of our guests had a question about CMOs in the past, and we love to learn new things and bring new information to the audience. Well, did you guys have any other thoughts after having just a lengthy conversation on the topic of pre-session pairing?
It was really cool to get to talk to Dr. Kelly about this article. And I thought that, it's such a simple idea, but then really getting to talk with her and unpack it and hear even more about the ins and outs of what it was like working with these kids and how much this type of setting manipulation really benefited them over time was really cool, and I think for me was inspiring as far as taking it back to what are the roots of what we're doing and why do we do it. And we want to help kids, we want to help them learn, and if you can change something as simple as just spending a little extra time with them playing before you start doing work, and that can make such a big difference in decreasing their challenging behavior and increasing their learning, then we should all be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to think about that we're not, finishing things on a checklist, that we're actually interacting with a real human child.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I talk to my teachers about these types of things a lot because I, for work with 2-year-olds, and we have to really...
That's not very nice to say about the employees you work with, Jack. I mean, Diana.
No. The students are 2-year-olds, the teachers are adults. But we have to really take into consideration that they are 2 and that they have short attention spans. Many of them been asked to sit down and do any type of demand-related activities before. And we need to make sure that we're establishing a rapport with us, which is one way that you can think about maybe alleviating some of the aversive contingencies in place. And also establishing ourselves as a social reinforcer for kids too. So this fit really well into the type of work that I'm already doing, and I'm going to take it back and share it with everybody.
She's actually going to take it to work.
Take it to work. There she goes. Singing again. That was my SD, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It worked.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Cool. Yeah, it was really fun. I'm glad we're doing it. If anyone else is interested in coming on our show, send us an email at abainsidetrack@gmail.com, and we'll think about it. We probably will do more than think about
consider
it.
Consider it. No, we'd probably love to have you.
Yeah.
All right. Without much more ado, I think that's it for this week's episode. So for everyone listening, thank you very much for doing so. If you're interested in purchasing continuing education credits for listening to our show, there is a link on the information button on this page. You can also go visit us at abainsidetrack.com. We're pretty much ABA Inside Track everywhere as our social media presence on Facebook and iTunes and YouTube and Twitter, all those great places. You can email us, like Jackie said, at abainsidetrack@gmail.com. Well, that's where we are on the internet. But hopefully you're listening to us directly in your ears on iTunes or Stitcher or whatever podcast app you like to use.
YouTube.
You can join us next week for a preview episode to discuss our next topic, trial-based functional analyses.
So, Rob, would you say that our preview episode is a means of doing pre-session pairing before listening to our full episode?
I would say every moment listening to us is probably considered pre-session pairing due to the joy we bring our listeners.
You're right. This is edutainment at its finest.
I don't want to demean what we're doing. I think it's educational that is just so damn entertaining is what I would like to think.
He said a swear word.
Folks at home, Jackie usually swears. I just have to edit them all out.
Yeah. That's funny.
Hey, now.
All right, that's enough of these shenanigans, everybody. It's time to put our nightcaps on and go to sleep. So please join us next week for that preview episode. But remember, until then, keep responding. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.